Since its release, the Nintendo Switch has never been in short supply of controllers. There are all kinds of different standardized designs and a lot of other kind of more specialty interesting ones. So it's been a little while. I wanted to wrap up some of my favorites and some of the more interesting choices out there for some special use cases. Today's video is sponsored by Mobile Gaming Core. The first controller I want to take a look at is the Retro Fighters Brawler 64. If you've never heard of them before, Retro Fighters is a company that specializes in making controllers for older systems. In the Brawler 64 case, it is designed for the N64 in mind, but these controllers also get modern versions that work on PC, mobile, and the Switch. And the Brawler 64 is a really interesting option specifically for playing N64 games on Nintendo Switch Online. Now, when N64 games very first launched on the Switch, it actually wasn't a great fit. The way that they had mapped what each of the buttons did, including the C buttons, and how that lines up with how Nintendo handled mapping for Nintendo Switch Online, didn't really match up. So if you tried using the Brawler 64 on N64 games on the Switch, it actually wasn't a great experience. However, this is something they became aware of and did a firmware update that adds a specialized NSO mode. So the way this works is that when you're using the Brawler 64 on the Switch, you actually do a special button combination, which then puts it in a specific mode where now the Brawler matches up the same mappings that Nintendo Switch has for NSO, making it a fully functional controller where all the button mappings line up and make sense with the Nintendo Switch Online control scheme. This makes it a really awesome fit for N64 because honestly, a lot of the initial default button mapping doesn't really make the most sense to me. I'm not a huge fan of how the interface for NSO and N64 games works, so having a controller that is designed to actually match up with all the buttons is really awesome. Now, of course, it's worth mentioning that Nintendo does also offer their own first-party N64 controller option for the Switch. A couple problems with this, though, is first off, they're very limited. They have been restocked over time, but they sell out very immediately. In fact, actually, I think just before I recorded this video, another batch went up and they disappeared within moments. So it's always a bit of a struggle to try and get a hold of those. And the other problem is, honestly, I don't really like the N64 controller. There's a part of me that enjoys the nostalgia of it, and it absolutely is something that, you know, calls back to what it was like to play games on that controller before, but I'd rather just use a controller that has the same button mappings and feels like a current controller, which the Brawler 64 offers as an option. When it comes to general use Nintendo Switch controllers, there are a lot of better choices out there than the Brawler 64, but in terms of this dedicated use of something that's really going to mesh well with the N64, it is an excellent choice. Now, working off of a similar premise but for a different set of games is the M30 controller from 8-Bit Do. They're another company that makes a lot of modern style controllers that are based on older style designs. They have some pro controller options out there like the 8-Bit Do Pro 2 that are very popular. The M30 though is their Sega designed controller. Now previously the purpose of this controller existing was either to use it with PC or you could play some of the kind of Sega Genesis collection games that are on the Switch, which it still is great for, but its relevance is even greater now since last year when Sega Genesis was added to Nintendo Switch Online alongside N64 games. The M30 is kind of a cross between a 6-button Sega Genesis controller and the Sega Saturn controller. The biggest things worth noting is, of course, it has the 6-button setup on the front, shoulder buttons, and one of my personal favorite things about it, the very large rounded D-pad design, which actually makes it, I think, useful not only for getting that kind of old school retro feel when playing Genesis games on the Switch, but even more importantly, it makes a great fight pad option for the Switch. I've actually been really getting into fighting games again lately. It was always a genre I loved and enjoyed, and I've dabbled in each release as they're coming out, but the last couple weeks I've been going back and playing a lot of stuff again. One game I've been enjoying recently is the Capcom Fighting Game Collection, which includes a bunch of the Darkstalkers games, along with a version of Street Fighter 2 Hyper Fighting, a bunch of other stuff. And while there are some dedicated fight pad designs out there that have been released for the Switch, I think the M30 is a really great fit for this because of that D-pad style design. I don't really like using sticks for fighters, but at the same time, some controllers' D-pads are just way too small or not really designed for this kind of use, and so the enlarged design of the M30 is really comfortable for that. And a 6-button setup is awesome because there are a number of fighters that, of course, make use of 6 buttons arcade style-wise for your movesets, where you have, say, light, medium, heavy punch, light, medium, heavy kick. Worth the same company also does make a dedicated fight stick for the Switch. I've come to embrace the fact that while I love fight sticks in concept, and there are still gonna be times where I try and use them heavily, pad is just a lot more comfortable for me. I don't know, it just feels a lot more natural. You know, I always grew up playing console versions of fighters more often than actually playing them at arcades themselves. I mean, Street Fighter 2 on the SNES is really where I got my start in the genre, and it just comes more naturally. So I've really begun embracing getting more into fight-dedicated pads rather than relying on sticks, and the M30 is a really good choice for the Switch. And again, with a library of Genesis games that are on the Switch, a few standalone re-releases, and also just standalone collections that you can buy as well, there's a lot of great Genesis titles you can re-experience on the Switch this controller will perfectly pair with. Now, the next controller I want to feature is a little bit more of a conventional design, and that is the Switchplate Controller from today's sponsor, MGC. If you haven't heard of them before, Mobile Gaming Core is an accessory maker that, as the name implies, has a really heavy focus on portable gaming, whether that's for a phone, tablet, or of course, the Nintendo Switch. And the Switchplate Controller is their mainline controller option for it. While its main intended use is for the Nintendo Switch, where you can use it wired or wirelessly, you can also use it on PC when it is specifically in the wired mode. This is a smaller, more compact Pro controller design for the Switch with a layout and grip design that is very reminiscent of the Xbox One controller, which is one of my personal favorite layouts, so big fan of that. The front-facing buttons and sticks have a similar tension and crispness as using an official Switch Pro controller, though worth noting, the D-pad and L and R buttons have a clicky register, which is really nice. As far as special features go, this is a controller that offers both gyro and rumble, and has a lot of different adjustable features. This remap button opens up a couple different customization features. Obviously, you can use it to remap the pair of back buttons to have different additional functionalities there. You can use it in combination with the sticks to adjust stick sensitivity between 4 different modes, and you can use it with the D-pad to adjust the rumble motors as well, so you can go for either a strong rumble, medium, low, or just turn it off completely if you'd rather not have it on for certain games. And of course, what third-party controller wouldn't be complete without having a good old-fashioned turbo function on top of all of that? Now, the namesake feature of the Switchplate, though, is the ability to be able to remove the front plate and put on a different one. Right now, I've got the white design, which evokes that Nintendo Switch OLED feel, but if you'd prefer, there's also a black cover it comes with, so you can have an all-black design with the neon red and blue, which is a look that I really like. If you're interested in grabbing one of these controllers, they're available at a number of major retailers, including Walmart, Target, and Best Buy. And if you want to learn more about it, I also have a link to their main site posted down below in the description, so make sure to check that out. Okay, I got another 8-bit design I want to talk about. It's actually one that I haven't had the chance to cover on the channel just yet, which is the new Lite 2. I did a video years ago talking about the original Lite, which is a really awesome small size pocket style controller, but that one ran into the unique issue of the fact that in the name of making itself as small and as thin of a profile as possible while still being usable, it embraced this double D-pad design. Like a little bit in certain respects, the problem it ran into though is that depending on the kind of games you want to play, 2 D-pads really doesn't work out very well. Obviously, for any game that uses first-person controls, not being able to differentiate between running and walking on the left stick, and not being able to control camera sensitivity with the right D-pad because it doesn't have range of motion like a stick does, that was a bit of a problem. And even in some 2D games, that'd be an issue because, again, if a game has differentiations between how fast you're moving at full tilt versus just a half tilt, can't really do that with the D-pad. So later on, 8BitDo released the Lite 2 alongside the Lite SE. The Lite SE is an accessibility-focused controller that adds more front-facing buttons to give more control options for it, whereas the Lite 2, really the biggest difference between it and the original Lite is getting rid of the D-pads in exchange for sticks. Now, this does get rid of some of the thinness of the profile. It makes it a little less comfortable to fit in your pocket, but they're close enough to the body that they're really not protruding that much more, and it doesn't feel awkward, while opening up the usefulness that sticks have. This ends up making a controller that is ever so slightly less portable, but still fits very comfortably in a pocket just fine, and more importantly, opens up functionality-wise to work across a much larger array of games. While there are absolutely more controllers out there that are more comfortable featuring traditional style grips, because this one doesn't, it's just a rectangle, when it comes to portability, this is really, I think, one of the best balances out there of something that is a pocketable controller that is still fully functional. This ends up making it a really good option if you're a fan of tabletop play, if you're ever using your Switch in an on-the-go situation and you like to be able to just set it up on a table and go and use a more traditional controller rather than relying on Joy-Cons. Or let's say you even want to do like local multiplayer on the go with tabletop, and that way one person can use a full Joy-Con set, and another person can use the Lite 2. Ability to easily slide this into a pocket or any kind of small carrying case is really nice. If you want something that's even tinier and works as more of a sideways Joy-Con replacement, they do also have the Zero controller, which is super teeny tiny. Honestly, functionality-wise, I don't really care for it that much. I think you're much better off investing in either just using Joy-Cons with grips or grabbing a Lite 2. But if you want something that has a little bit of novelty to it, and is by far the most flat-out portable controller there is for the Switch, that is another choice out there. Now, another style of controller I want to touch on are Joy-Con replacements, where instead of getting a controller that that is a more traditional design that you hold on its own. They're ones that attach to the side of the Switch. And there are a lot of really cool options out there. One in particular that I covered recently is the new Hori Split Pad Compact. I believe they're available at some brick and mortar retailers right now, but some of the online order options are not up just yet. But these are a midpoint between their larger Split Pad Pro and the small size of official Nintendo Joy-Cons. There is, of course, also the full-size Split Pad Pro, which is a really comfortable grip design that just makes the Switch huge, especially if you're using an OLED because the already wider size of that. Another one worth noting is that there are a lot of unlicensed options out there that fulfill this role and add a little bit of extra functionality. What is probably one of the most popular ones that at least came out first were the bin box Joy-Cons. These offer the same kind of enlarged style size grip that the Split Pad Pro had, but while adding a lot of functionalities that it didn't at the same price point. This includes things like having vibration, not HD rumble like actual Joy-Cons, but still some form of rumble unlike the Split Pads, and could be used fully wirelessly. Now, I've actually compared these two a couple times in the past, and I will say that in my own personal life, I actually do use the Hori a little more. I like the grip shape and find them to be a bit more comfortable. But part of that is also from the fact that because I review controllers a lot, I have a lot of choices out there and I'm able to pick different controllers for different specific situations, which is what this whole video is about. That said, if you just want one pair of controllers that can act like Joy-Cons, that are bigger, that are more comfortable, and can be used wirelessly, the bin box are something that do offer that functionality. By comparison, the Split Pad Compacts are a really interesting new option because despite being called the Compacts, they still add enough size to the Switch that makes it a little awkward to fit in certain carrying cases, but ultimately they are much smaller than a lot of these other larger Joy-Con options, and it occupies this potentially really nice midpoint for some people where, you know, if you like the small size of the Joy-Cons, but you do find them uncomfortable to use over time because they don't really have a grip shape to them, and the Split Pad Pro sounds nice for that, but it's a little too big for your hands, the Compact is really riding that line in between that might be just right for you. So there's a bunch of interesting controllers you can grab for your Nintendo Switch. I do want to thank Mobile Gaming Core again for sponsoring today's video. All of the controllers I talked about, theirs and the others, are linked down below in the description, so check those out if you want to learn more about any of them or maybe want to grab one. As always, if you enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up button to let me know, or thumbs down if you didn't. It's good info for me to have. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Make sure to hit that little notification bell so you actually see when my videos get posted, and I will see you guys later.